Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce you now. Christine Trimpe is a transformative wellness leader dedicated to empowering people to reclaim their health and vitality through her faith based, holistic approach to weight loss. As the founder of the SugarFreed Me method and a certified sugar licensed practitioner, Christine helps clients achieve lifelong healing from sugar addiction and food related struggles. Her clients experience dramatic transformations, including sustained weight loss and breakthroughs in physical, and spiritual health, with over an 80% retention rate in her programs. That is amazing. She is the author of Sugar Freed: Stop Losing the Weight Loss Battle, Start Gaining the Victory, which was released in 2025 and already has a 4.9-star rating on Amazon. Christine's own story, marked by a significant health journey, an embrace of ketogenic eating, and a breakthrough lifestyle change, has inspired thousands since she first shared it on her blog and across social media. Her journey has been highlighted in leading wellness magazines, including Women's World and First for Women, and featured on dietdoctor.com, where she was named a top low carb success story. You can find Christine on her website at www.christinetrimpe.com. Christine Trimpe, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Hey, Casey. I'm so delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
It is an honor to host you. Sugar addiction is something I love talking about and love giving so many different perspectives on. And that's fantastic. You have an incredible story of healing yourself, which I think makes it so much more powerful to be able to relate to your clients. Obviously, we mentioned that in the introduction. And as part of your story, I've heard you talk about certain hikes in Colorado in particular. And being in Utah, we always, it's no secret to the listener, we're always trying to promote Colorado. Everybody should move to Colorado. Don't come to Utah. Nothing to see on this side of the hill. It's way better over there. And you mentioned one particular hike, which was the incline in Manitou. I've heard you talk about before, which is a little bit like calling the Grand Canyon like a hole in the ground. That's not necessarily a hike. Can you tell the listener, if they haven't heard of that, what the incline is in Manitou?
Oh my goodness. Being 58 years old now, that's how old I am. I would definitely call that an extreme hike and one that I never planned to do in my life. But my very athletic daughter encouraged me on a trip to Colorado recently. The Manitou Incline used to be a railway to help get equipment up the side of the mountain. And it is a very steep elevation. At one point, there's like a change in elevation of about 60%. And I remember climbing on my hands and knees. It is 2,768 stair steps, pretty much straight up. There's a false summit. So that was really disappointing when I got to that. But Casey, it was the most extreme hike I have ever done in my life, and one that I wanted to bail at the halfway point, but I'm so glad I didn't, because once I made it to the top, my daughter was right. She just kept saying, Mom, just imagine what you're going to feel like when you make it to this summit. Because after 30 years of not being able to climb mountains and just longing to do that, I love mountains. I love the mountain scenery. I finally am able to climb mountains. So I'm so grateful for that.
Good for you. That's absolutely amazing. I didn't prep you for that question. You just spit out like the exact number of steps on the thing. Like that was
Yes,
amazing. Good call.
I'll never
Uh,
forget it.
that's amazing. Yeah, you definitely remember every single one of those
Yes,
2,000 plus steps. So,
yes,
so it's railroad ties, but they
yeah.
had a function before that wasn't put there just for the hike itself.
Right, exactly. They used to take equipment up the side of the mountain, like,
Wow.
and there's, for, I think that it was probably shut down maybe 20, 30, maybe even 40 years ago, but, the railroad ties are still there, and it is a very popular hike now.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So you roll up to it in the parking lot. My buddy's like, "Hey, let's go do a hike." I'm like, "All right, whatever." I'm visiting Colorado Springs. You pull up to it, you just see the straight vertical line. And I remember
Yes,
asking him, like, "Where is the hike?" He's like, "It's right there." I'm like, "What are you talking about? That's not a
yeah,
hike. That's like a straight line vertical." Oh my goodness. And yeah, that halfway false summit is a heartbreaker. You can hardly like
yeah,
look up and see because it is so steep anyway.
yes,
But then when it levels off a little bit and goes up again, you realize like, oh, I'm only halfway done. And it's so
right,
discouraging too, because the locals, like you'll see like 80-year-old dudes that are like floating up this thing and passing you because they do it every day and their cardio is amazing from like losing a
right.
lung. It's
Yeah,
quite the experience.
several people passed us, and I had conversations with a few of them, and they are in the 500 club. They climb that baby 500 times a year. They live
Wow.
locally, so that's something that they do for fitness,
Oh
and
my goodness.
it's just amazing. I don't know that I would ever go back and do it again, Casey, because it's one and done, right? The climb up was strenuous, but the hike down, I don't know if you found this too, but the hike down was very steep and really hard on my knees.
Oh,
That
so
was that was even more difficult than the hike up, I thought.
so you went directly back down all those steps.
No, there's like a 3 mile switchback trail on the side
Okay.
of the mountain that takes you back down.
That's
Yes.
okay. That's what I did. I was wondering if you'd get like going straight down the steps would be terrible. I did see a few
Oh,
people descending. I thought it was awful. But yeah, they do have that like kind of connector trail. And yeah, that was quite
yes.
steep to get down as well. I remember
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. It was
Wow.
crazy, but I'm so glad I did it.
Yeah, good for you. It's such a cool experience to be able to do it. Again, you might feel like you're losing a lung, especially at that elevation. And if you really think about the 500 Club, you would just think like, oh, they just do it like, you know, once and a half average a day. But you have to remember, this is Colorado Springs. I think the in Manitou, the starting elevation was what, like 6,000 up to 8,000.
Yes.
So that's probably not even doable 6 months, 7 months out of the year. So you're crunching
Right.
500 times into a few
Yes.
months in the summer.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Right. Right. And I also live at sea level. So to go to Colorado, which I have done many times, and to climb there is like it just makes it even that more strenuous, but it's a beautiful place to be. And I want to tell you that I have been to Utah as well. And I went to Utah before I went to Colorado. I thought Utah was so beautiful. And then I went to Colorado and I was like, oh man, Colorado just knocked Utah off my top list. But
Thank
it's
you.
still beautiful.
Thank
It's
you. We'll
so
be the
beautiful.
little brother. That's totally fine. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I was worried I was going to have to cut that out of the
No.
episode if too many people are moving in. So I appreciate that. Yeah, Colorado's amazing. I'm lucky to have family there on the outskirts of Denver, and it's just so
Yeah.
beautiful in the mountains. And yeah, I do
Yeah.
have an advantage where I'm sitting right here is about 5,000 feet in elevation. And so appreciating what it must be like to get up to 8,000, 9,000 from sea level, that's a
Yeah.
lot. So yeah,
Yeah. It's crazy. It
wow.
was crazy, but
Well,
crazy fun. I'm so glad I did it. And I really appreciate my daughter for pushing me.
yeah, that's awesome. Wow. Well, like we said, it's part of your story, certain hikes, and that was kind of a big turning point in your life, which I've heard you talk about in the past. What I haven't heard as much of is the journey into the unhealthy version of you. As you look back and reflect on, maybe that kind of first part of your life, if we want to use a certain hike in Colorado as like the dividing point, what do you like? How did your life go? How did you end up in such a difficult place health wise? And again, using hindsight to look back and evaluate kind of your life.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I did go through a period of chubbiness when I was in middle elementary school. And so I can look back and can see like that's when the emotional damage began with my health and wellness journey and just, using food to cope and hiding food and sneaking food. And that is like the early signs of when I really did have a sugar addiction because I can remember my mom used to buy the little Debbie snack cake rolls, and I have a baby brother who's only 10 and a half months younger than me, and I wanted to make sure that he didn't get any of those. So I can remember like hiding those and sneaking them and like making sure that I had access to them. So that was my very early signs. I did thin out a little bit in the high school years, but again, I was always the bullying continued. Throughout my high school years too. I'm not really sure why. I could look back on pictures of myself and I could see that I wasn't chubby or overweight at that time, but I just felt very insecure in my own skin. And then when I went away to college, I lived in a dormitory, so I was eating in the college cafeteria. And unfortunately, I really think that it has a lot to do with my metabolism. I'm super carb sensitive, and my metabolic health just continued to deteriorate. Of course, I was eating standard American diet, and over from my adult years 18 to 48, when I finally had my turning point moment at another mountain in Colorado in Rocky Mountain National Park, I was I never would have called myself a sugar addict during those years, Casey. Never. I never thought that. I just thought that for some reason I was a yo-yo dieter. I had some diet success, and then I would get to a certain point, and perhaps I would try something in moderation, and it would send me on a slip or a relapse, and then I would just be right back to where I was started from. And all of those years, I had doctors telling me that I needed to lose weight, like, hello, tell me something I didn't know. Because eventually I got up to 230 pounds on the scale that I know of. Like, that's the highest weight that I saw on the scale. I didn't weigh myself that often, but tell me something I didn't know. I know I need to lose weight. And they would say, eat less, move more. And so I would try to exercise. I did the aerobics in the 90s, like the aerobics craze. I joined gyms. I counted my points. I counted calories. I actually did a liquid protein shake diet for 10 months in a hospital supervised clinical program, and none of it stuck. And I had doctors telling me, I remember in that hospital program, they said you have metabolic syndrome, but they really didn't explain it was. And then eventually I started hearing terms like insulin resistance, and then I was pre-diabetes, and then I was morbidly obese, and so on. I did, no one ever stopped to talk to me about the impact of the hormones on my health, what was happening with my blood sugar, what was happening with my insulin hormone. And so I would just continue to try to follow all the dietary advice that I thought was going to work, every time. And nothing just really clicked for my metabolism.
Yeah, wow. Thank you for sharing that. It's such a difficult journey. I was kind of a chubby kid and at that same age as well, which is like the worst time to experience that.
Yes.
Very traumatic at that age, 12, 13,
Yeah.
to be going through that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's very interesting. It's so frustrating when you hear that story and everybody hears it, where the doctor is only telling you that you need to lose weight, but they don't really tell you how. And if they do, it's the wrong advice anyway. And it's like you said, I know, you don't need to tell me that. Like, I already know that. I already feel bad about myself. Was there an
Mhm.
element of you? I know we're both huge fans of Jason Fung. He talks about like blaming the victim, that kind of thing. Were you blaming yourself at this point? Did you think that something was broken with you because all these doctors were telling you the same thing and it just wasn't working for you?
Oh, absolutely. Because every time I would lose weight, like if I would lose 40 pounds and then I would regain 50, and then I would lose 45 pounds and gain 55, it was just a vicious cycle. And as a professional career woman in my career life, I was an accountant in corporate America for many years. And, I felt like I had a successful career. My kids were growing up and they were thriving, we're just typical middle income family. And but I couldn't get this weight loss thing right. It's like, what am I missing? What is, like, how can I get everything else in my life right, but I can't do this? And I got to the point where I was really hopeless. And so when I did go to that Rocky Mountain National Park in the fall of 2015 with my husband for an anniversary trip, he planned some hikes for us, and he wanted to go to Nymph Lake at Bear Lake stop. And I looked at the mile marker, the trail marker, and it said a half a mile. And I thought, well, I could give that a try because, a half a mile. And I wasn't walking with a cane or a walker or anything at that point, but I was chronically exhausted and 100 pounds overweight. And I gave it my best effort. And I got about halfway up that trail, and I just could not go another step further. I was gasping for air, and my body was just saying, no, no more. And so I sat on the stump on the side of that trail, and gave my husband permission to go ahead, go on without me. He's like, "Are you sure?" And I'm like, "Yes, I'm absolutely sure." So it was really in that moment that I remember just praying like, God, I just want to feel better, because like I said, I was getting to hopeless. I was getting to the point of hopelessness, and that feeling like I was going to always be obese. And but in that moment, something shifted. Like, I just did not want that to be my story, because at that time I was only 48 years old. Started thinking about my future grandchildren, started thinking about my daughter who just started nursing school. Oh my goodness, is she going to have to take care of an old and really obese mom? And like all these thoughts I'm having. So I came home from that trip with a really different resolve in my heart. It's like a no plan B. It's like, I have to do this now. It's now or never, is basically what it came down to.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. What a cool story. How did that not send you even harder into the same advice? How did that not mean to you like, oh, now I need to double down on more exercise. I can eat less than I ever had before. How was that not the path?
Yeah, well, interestingly, the first thing I promised my husband to do when we got home was to schedule a sleep study that I had been putting off for years. He had been asking me to do that because I snored very obnoxiously, and it escalated a lot when I was in Colorado. So coming home to Michigan, I told him I'm going to get a sleep study. And so I started researching about sleep and sleep hormones and hormonal health and everything. And that kind of lit a fire in my curiosity, or it made me very curious, like about my hormonal health. And then very shortly after I got my CPAP machine, I started having painful ovarian cysts. So then I had a abdominal ultrasound, and then that diagnosed me with fatty liver disease. And then, like, the interest in hormones just took off from there. I wanted to know why my liver was full of fat. How did that happen? Why didn't my doctor seem that concerned? So I did a lot of research myself. And I remember reading something somewhere. I did not bookmark it, unfortunately, but I remember reading that sugar is a major hormone disruptor. My liver is loaded with fat because of I believed at that time it was because of my diet. And then I really had to take a hard look at how much sugar I was really eating. And so that's what set me down this path of living a sugar-free lifestyle. It was step by step. And I'm a believer, I do see God's hand all over it with my chronic disease diagnosis that was piling up. I think if I would have done it all on at one point, it would have been too overwhelming, but I can see like a little bit gradually, I learned more and began to discover so much more about our hormonal health and our metabolic health. And it was just really the key to unlocking my obesity, like what Dr. Fung talks about.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. Have you ever seen a video of somebody with sleep apnea as they're like losing their breath in the middle of the night?
No, I've never seen a video like
I
that.
was at, I think it was KetoCon 2023 when Dr. Kevin Stock, who's a dentist, was talking about proper breathing and dentition. And he basically was like, okay, I'm going to show you guys a video. I want you to try to hold your breath for as long as this person stops breathing. And you watch this video of this guy sleeping, and he does not take a breath for a good like 35, 40 seconds. And like hardly anybody in the room could hold their breath for that long. It
Yes.
looks awful to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe it. And I did have that, like the sleep study confirmed that I had obstructive sleep apnea. So that also gave me hope that I could reverse this because the doctor talked to me about, if you lose some weight, this will get better. And so that gave me some inspiration too.
And we've had a lot of sleep experts come on the show and say, like, yes, you definitely want to reverse it. And it's amazing that you were able to, but also, like you said, using a CPAP in that situation, use it. Like, if there's any
Yes.
question, use it, get over the hump. You can get to a point where you don't need it anymore. But if it's a question of you trying to like gut it out or whatever, no, use the CPAP.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so grateful. As much as I didn't want that CPAP machine, I see it was the best first medical intervention that I decided to take. And eventually I was able to stop using it, but I did have a repeat sleep study to make sure that I had reversed it.
What was the first medical intervention? Did you have any others? Were you on any other medications at the time?
No, I was in a diabetes prevention program because I was diagnosed with type pre-diabetes at that time. So I was trying to avoid type 2 diabetes. And I knew, like the doctor said, you're just one blood test away from being full-blown type 2 diabetic. So I was trying to do that with diet, and I was following, the dietary advice that I would not advise because, for example, I was eating oatmeal with blueberries and a drizzle of brown rice syrup on top of it as my breakfast, which is the most important meal of the day. I wasn't hungry, but here I was starting my day with, I put that in my carb manager app, and it's 65 grams of carbohydrates, which is more than I eat in 3 days now. So that's
Yeah.
how I was starting my day every day.
That's amazing. Wow. Starving in 2 hours. I remember just being
Yes,
absolutely
yes,
starving. And guess what? You're not starving for another bowl of oatmeal. You want candy bars and a soda,
right.
quick pick me up. So as you started learning that sugar was, especially in your own health, quite harmful, what were your next steps? Like, did you start to kind of like add up and look at how much sugar was in your diet in like a normal day? And was that number pretty astounding to you?
Yeah, actually, I decided that I was going to take a step-by-step approach. So I examined like how I was starting my day was with coffee and flavored creamer. So I decided to give up coffee cold turkey so that I would not be drinking like the hazelnut creamer or French vanilla creamer. And then, just I worked in a corporate office with a bunch of women, and it was so easy to just like mindlessly put a piece of candy in your mouth. I wasn't a huge candy person, but I decided to swear off candy, to swear off pastries, desserts, the cake that we would have in our office like once a week or once every other week for birthday celebrations. So I started swearing off all the sweet things and I started reading ingredient labels. And but what really held me up that I didn't realize at the time was I was more of a savory carbohydrate junkie. So the potatoes, the potato chips, the bread, the pasta, even if I was eating whole wheat bread or whole wheat pasta. So I continued to eat that. And for 10 months, not eating anything sweet sugar wise, I lost about 18 pounds. And I was very frustrated. And I wanted to know, like, why is my weight loss so slow? I feel like I'm doing everything right. And that's when I had a conversation with a friend, and she said, "Hey, have you ever heard of this doctor named Jason Fung? He's in Toronto and he wrote this book about hormones." And we were talking about hormones at the time. And so I went home that night and I Googled fasting and hormones, and that was the day that changed my life forever. That
Wow.
was the last day I ate bread and potato and pasta for my, I just had bread, potato, and pasta over lunch with this friend at a steak restaurant. So then I just started eating, low carb and following a lot of the advice that Dr. Fung gave. He really his book changed my life and his videos.
Yeah, true. Yeah, no, his videos were amazing. That was, yeah, definitely changed my life as well. I was completely unaware of that and testing people's metabolic rates and thinking that if somebody was going to do fasting, they would decrease their metabolic rate. And yet I would test somebody in a fast and their metabolic rate would be so much higher, even though they weren't eating enough. And I was like, well, that doesn't make sense because if you eat less, you crash your metabolism. We know that. And Dr. Fung was the first one to like kind of explain that mechanism and why it's so different. Had you changed your diet sufficiently at that point to make fasting pretty easy and have that be the next step, or were you mentioned that was the last day that you had bread and pasta, but how long did it take you before changing your diet before fasting became a really good option for you?
Well, over that 10 months that I was not eating the sweet sugar, I realized probably within about 4 or 6 weeks that I was no longer craving the sweet sugar, but I was still eating, the bread, potato, and pasta. So the day I discovered Dr. Fung and the Diet Doctor website, I decided to do the Diet Doctor 2-week challenge and fully committed to it. And I remember about 4 or 5 days in, I slipped into a state of ketosis, and I remember sitting at the dining room table and telling my husband like something feels really weird. Like I had this crazy amount of energy, and that's like from then on I had energy all day every day to spare. And so because I had started eating healthier and I was able to bust the sugar cravings. Now, most of this is in hindsight for me, Casey,
Of course.
because I can look back and I can see like, oh, wow. And then this happened, and then this happened, and this happened. And that's how I'm able to like help the women that I coach. Like, really, I don't want them to suffer as long as I did. So, just getting off all of that sugar, the grains, the high starchy diet, telling them, and I like to say, like, as soon as you realize what's happening to you, you're gonna be like, oh, like I told you so.
Yeah.
It's such an amazing feeling. And so that truly happened for me when I committed to that 2-week challenge, and I never looked back.
That's amazing. Wow. I can't say enough good about Diet Doctor. That was so instrumental in me learning this stuff as well.
Yes.
Obviously, for a few years in the past, they've taken a bit of a deviation and have
Mhm.
promoted something a little bit different. And now they're back to being a really good low carbohydrate source that I can recommend for people. And we were working for a big corporate gym and we were forced to do weight loss programs with people where we give people like the packets of information and all the meal plans and the
Yes.
food list for like all these obscure, insane ingredients. And once we figured out low carb, and by the way, like we mentioned your programs have an 80% retention rate. This program company wide had a 15%
Yeah.
compliance rate in like a 2 month like weight loss contest. Like
Wow.
terrible, terrible. The only thing that my wife and I did once we figured out that keto is awesome is we just went to Diet Doctor. We just printed out some of the recipes and told people like, look, find the ones you like. There's
Mhm.
shopping list here. These are really delicious. You can add carbohydrates for other people who don't want to do this, but just try to stick with this. And yeah, compliance went up for us like, oh, well over 60%. And people lost massive amounts of fat. It was unbelievable. And all that was the only resource we gave them was just Diet Doctor meals. Great.
Yeah, I know it's amazing. And it's like I've done a lot of free challenges with people too. Besides my coaching programs, it's like just follow this meal plan and like you can do it. And the retention that I have, I think part of that is also because I always talk to every woman that I coach. I have to I do screen every person that I coach. So I need to make sure that they're ready because the sugar-free me journey is not just physical. It's not just about me telling them what to eat, what not to eat, but we get into like the deep rooted issues to our cravings. Why are we craving? What's, how we can change our habits and look at our cues and address our cravings. Because I learned that I was craving all the wrong things, and it is possible to flip those cravings so that, the cravings are not driving you mad. So I take them, we do physical, we do emotional, and we do spiritual. It's a faith-based journey as well too. So it's very important to me to talk to everybody before they actually enroll in the program, because I want to know that that I can help them and I can support them along the way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's wonderful. Before we talk about some of the things you work with your clients on your own personal story, having lost all that weight, maintained the weight loss, I don't think that gets talked about enough, by the way, that you were able to absolutely maintain it. That's incredible. Congratulations on that. But we look at these stories and we think, oh, Christine arrived. She's there. She's at the place of rainbows and sunshine and
Yes.
birds are singing and everything. Talk about how do you have to live your life to be able to maintain those results? Is it still a struggle? Is it still something you have to think about constantly?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, first of all, I set out to write my book about 6 years ago. And at the time, it had a different title. It was called Craving Joy. It was a lot about my story, but I was like on the top of a mountain, all rainbows and unicorns, just like you mentioned. And I was like, this is a victory story. Come join me here. And then my life came crashing down because of a family situation and someone that has a serious health issue, and it is very difficult. It was very off and on. My life gets very difficult and very complicated and very complex with this situation. And the fact that I did not eat my feelings and regain all my weight is, to me, it's like a testament of like how wonderful and how powerful this way of eating is. And plus my faith, like it's a testimony to the power of God working in what he has changed and transformed in my life. So now the book is completely different. Now it also incorporates like, hey, this is going to be one of the hardest things that you ever do. We need to work on, there's a whole section in the book on the emotional healing, and there's a whole section in the book on spiritual healing. And it starts out with a whole section on resolving it. Like, hey, how did we get in this situation? How are we going to get out? A lot of things that we have to really come to the starting line. I say, if you're ready to start this journey with me, then hey, I'm willing to link arms with you. But yeah, most definitely, it has not been all rainbows and sunshine. But I just posted today on X that I'm really going through a difficult time right now, actually. And I am just so grateful for the healthy habits that I've established in my life. Like, I could have stayed in bed today with the covers over my head, but instead, I know that my Fit Body Forever buddies are waiting for me to show up and do our workout routine with them. And it is a highlight of my week to go there 3 times a week. So we've got establishing these healthy habits has really changed my life. And that is really the key to what has changed for me this time around. Because before, when I tried to lose weight, I might have counted my points, and recorded it. But I really didn't do a lot of mindset work, and I certainly didn't make it a spiritual journey. So,
Yeah.
all of that to say, it's not all rainbows and unicorns, but there is, when we get these healthy habits in place and we have this resolve, and I'm never going back, Casey. Let's just put it that way. I never want to go back to being morbidly obese.
That's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
and reiterating something that you mentioned earlier, like the habits, once they're in place, they do stay in place. And if you're feeling like this is a million miles away for you, you can start with something very, very small and
Mm,
just start with that. Like I mentioned all the time, like several years ago when trackers, step trackers were really popular, I started parking at the very furthest spot in a parking lot. And that was like 15 years ago. And I haven't stopped to this day just because it's faster and easier. And think about all those steps and all the sunshine and all the things that I get from doing that every
right.
time. You can think about those little things that have compounding interest almost, and they will lead to other habits down the road. So if somebody's thinking like, oh, she did it, but I'm never going to be able to do all these things, just remember, like, start with something very, very small.
Yeah, and actually think about I have been doing this for almost 10 years now. Like this that
Right.
anniversary trip was in September of 2015, and it wasn't until January of 2017 that I learned about Dr. Fung, and then it wasn't until January 2018 that I got to a healthy weight. So, and then just keeping these habits going. I always say one of my sayings when I speak and present is small habit changes build and deliver big results. And really, I'm a huge fan of habits. I find all of the science behind habits really fascinating. And so that is a lot of what we talk about in our group coaching calls too, is like, hey, what habits are you working on? What have you seen working? What have you seen building? What, just keep habit stacking, and
Yeah.
that really is where the change comes in.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. I do want to talk to you about moderation and abstaining.
Mhm.
Before I do, one more personal question. Surely you've gone off your diet at some point in the last several years. Can you describe what it's like for somebody like you who has identified more as an abstainer, what it's like when you go off and have something you know you shouldn't have? Can you talk about that experience?
Yeah, this is such a conundrum for me because I feel like I'm a very type A person. So it's kind of hard for me to explain this to deviate. I like to live by the rule of no deviation in life, right? But when I went to Ireland, for example, that was one of my rewards after I got to a healthy weight. My daughter and I did a 3-week trip around Ireland, and I decided to have some fish and chips when I was in Ireland. And I was really nervous about it because I didn't want it to set me up for like overindulging the whole trip. But I was able to enjoy it, and I doused it in vinegar, by the way. And it didn't trip me up. It really did not trip me up. And so even going through seasons of difficulty, I have these habits in place. Like right now, I wanted to eat. For some reason, I wanted candy the other night. I don't want candy typically, but because I was under a significant amount of stress, I stood in the family room in my home and I just did some habit things that I have. Like I did box breathing for about 2 minutes. And I use scripture a lot. There's again, it just all comes down to the idea that I never want to be morbidly obese again. It kind of that's kind of what keeps me on the straight and narrow.
Yeah, you realize what a knife edge you can be on. Like this is what has
Yes.
led me to kind of being very much carnivorous and not taking very many deviations because if I deviate, it pays me back. It hurts. It sucks for a while. And it's you get over it. It's not the worst. You just go back into a fast and you can get right back in. But to have
Mhm.
anxiety to come back, to have cravings for really crappy food that you normally don't have and stepped away from. And it's just like you could just walk through a store at any time and just grab whatever looked good to you that day, and you could be right back to where you were. I know people personally who took the trip to Europe and they went off the diet and they never recovered, and it's been years and
Yeah.
they never get back. So it's a tough conversation to have with people because it doesn't seem fair, right? Some people can moderate and have a little bit here. Other people just come to the same conclusion that you and I have kind of come to. Like, I'm not very good at stopping. When I start, it's easier for me not to start. How do you help
Right.
people recognize that they are truly abstainers and really are not moderators? It's not the best news to hear, let me
Right.
tell you.
It's definitely not what they want to hear, but um, sharing stories. I mean, and we just have a lot of conversations in our group coaching calls. And I was really delighted to learn in my sugar addiction training that I did with Bitten that group coaching is scientifically backed for success. So I really encourage these women, especially when they're having a difficult day or a difficult week, difficult season of life, that is a priority. They have to make the group coaching a priority. So we have these conversations and we get very vulnerable and very authentic in them. And there's a lot of times when people come and confess. And if every conversation is going great during a group coaching call, I'll be like, this is great. I love celebrating their wins. Now, what are we not talking about? Like, is there anybody that needs to share something that they do, really feel like they don't want to share? So I am, because I've been doing this for so long now, I feel like I relate to them. Like I definitely know where they're at. I know where they've been. I know where they want to be. And that's the power of community and the power of connecting with other women just like me who have struggled with the same things, the emotional eating, the trauma, the baggage, the excess weight for years, the yo-yo dieting, to the point that we don't even discuss with our husbands how difficult this is for us. I never told my husband the level of my misery. I never told him how unhappy I was. And I just showed up every day with a mask on. And so taking off the mask and just, being real and being present and listening to stories, stories are so powerful.
Yeah, they really are. You mentioned Jason Fung, and he had a podcast. I don't know if you ever got into this. I believe it was the IDM podcast, and it was basically around stories. And I remember 2017, 2018, first learning this kind of stuff and listening to those stories over and over and over again was so powerful and very, very helpful. So I love the group aspect of things. I think that is a very powerful thing to do as well. And I really enjoy your book, SugarFreed. You wrote, you also kind of broke it down into kind of 4 different sections, which I really like.
Yeah.
The first section, does that help people identify whether they are more of that person that should be abstaining, they should be thinking about sugar as maybe more of a chemical versus like a food stuff kind of a thing?
Yeah, it introduces that question, that food for thought, and it also introduces like, hey, I know you're exhausted of doing this, but if you really want to resolve this and show up for your health, I always say once and forever, not once and for all, but this is like a once and forever thing because once you get it, you don't want to look back. So come and like, I take them through 2 why questions, like why did we get here? Why do we want to get out? And that can get really deep as far as some of us carry really damaging emotional trauma, from years of abuse, physical, emotional, spiritual abuse, and then end up coping with food, hiding with food, secret eating with food. There's so much of that. And then we carry that guilt and shame. And the one thing I love about what Dr. Fung, one of his first videos I watched, like he just looked in the camera and he said, "This is not your fault." And I was mind blown when he said that. I'm like, what do you mean this is not your fault? And so when I coach women, I like to tell them, like, hey, this is not entirely your fault. I use entirely because I believe like it's now our responsibility to do something. And so
Yep.
that's what the first section does. It gets them to the point where they will take responsibility for their health.
Yeah. No, I love helping to point that out to people like, no, this isn't your fault, but yes, this is your responsibility.
Yes.
You need to now own this if you want to heal from this, and it is possible. I
Yes.
love that. You also talk about in the second section, restoring your body. Tell us
Yes.
some of the key points that you write about there.
Yeah, so in that section, I share about all of my chronic disease diagnoses and how it was impacting me, and how the low carb lifestyle, the ketogenic lifestyle, just completely reversed all of that. I was able to reverse the prediabetes and the obstructive sleep apnea and the fatty liver disease and the pain and inflammation. And I no longer need knee surgery, knee replacement surgery, just all of that. And then I give them, that is really a section with a lot of guidance. Like, hey, this is what a grocery shopping list looks like. This is what meal planning looks like. This is what's going to change in your metabolism. This is what sugar is doing to your metabolism. This is the damage that sugar is doing to you. It's fueling inflammation. It is adding, it's driving disease and driving your weight gain situation. So just kind of a real educational section on what the sugar, like how damaging it is, and then also like, well, what can we do about that? What does it look like when we take sugar away from the equation of what we're eating every day?
Right. Yeah. I know you write about the transition period, which I wanted to ask you about. I got the dreaded text today of one of my clients who's just going through it right now, and she's like, "Oh, I'm teaching class. I can't get out of here. I've got a massive headache. I didn't bring salt. I don't have my salt shaker." Like, "Oh, you're gonna have a few rough hours if you don't find something salty." How do you help people transition from being sugar burners primarily over to being fat burners?
Oh yeah, we do. I do take a step-by-step approach with my clients, and I recommend that they get off of sugar within like a 2 to 3 week period. And I'll talk to them individually what that looks like for each and every one of them, because we're all different. Some of them are like eating whole boxes of Cheez-Its, and some of them are eating half gallons of ice cream. What does this look like? So we kind of make an individualized step-by-step plan. And and I give them, I equip them with like what the keto flu might look like, what you need to have on hand, how quickly this is going to pass. I promise. You're going to feel so much better on the other side. Just stick with it. And of course, the salt, electrolytes as needed. And also, one of my favorite tips I love to give them is I learned this maybe on X at the very, well, it was Twitter then, but at the very beginning when I started engaging with the low carb community, to, if I had a sugar craving, to just nibble on a tiny square of extra sharp cheese. And it worked. It worked for me, and it seems to work for my coaching clients. And I think it's the sourness of the cheese
Hmm.
that just kind of busts that craving and just
Yeah.
helps you get past that. So just things like that, tips like that, I like to give.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And also, like, you have to kind of point out to people that, like, look, this is you traveling to an amazing country. You're in the travel phase right now, and the travel phase is not very fun. The destination phase is the fun. This is the sign that you're on the way. It sucks.
Ooh,
You
yes.
the
Yeah.
layovers and lines and all kinds of crap that you have to go through, but you're on the way, and this is the sign that shows you. So I think it's nice to point that out as well. Um,
Yes.
I love that you also write about mindset and everything that we're kind of learning now about metabolic psychiatry and how the mind, obviously, like Dr. Georgia Eat says, the mind is definitely connected to the body, I'm pretty sure, and how that relates. Tell us about some of the things you wrote about as far as restoring the mind as well.
Yeah, and I'm so excited about the metabolic health and the ketogenic diet on mental health. Oh my goodness,
It's amazing.
it is amazing, and I really want to spend more time like digging in and really getting to know that. And interestingly enough, all those years that I felt, lived in morbid obesity, I'm pretty positive I had an undiagnosed mental health issues like with depression and anxiety and all of that, because that cloud just lifted, that brain fog just lifted and everything. But in the renewing your mind section, it really is written kind of from a faith-based approach as well too. But we all do know that those of us that battle with our weight and with our poor metabolic health, a lot of us are doing things like the secret eating. And I talk a lot about like, why are we craving the things that we crave? How can we change up those cravings? And how can we quiet that food noise? How can we stop coping with food? Um, Destroying old patterns of behavior. That's a big one too. I mean, that's all about the habit changing and establishing new healthy habits, destroying like our old behaviors. I share a story in that section about one of my best friends that I grew up with. My friend Heidi was always a little skinny mini. Like she was one of those girls that like never had an ounce of fat on her body. But as she approached menopause, she started having this 20 pounds that she couldn't shift. And she was a chronic exerciser. She loved Zumba. And she saw what I was doing. She saw me lose the weight. She was so happy for me. She would ask me really inquisitive questions, but I don't think she ever thought it was for her because she's always been skinny, right? She's never had this problem. Well, she was diagnosed with prediabetes and she immediately called me. And so it was just a matter of helping her establish new patterns in her day. Like she was grazing all day long. She was snacking all night long, and so I explained to her like what she wanted to do, to start, normalizing her blood sugar and normalizing her insulin hormone. And so she established so many new healthy habits, and I'm so proud of her. She actually ended up losing like 25 pounds, reversing her prediabetes, and she has a really healthy HbA1c now. Her doctor's very happy. But just things like that. And then also, for those of us that have carried the heavy weight of guilt and shame, I talk a lot about how we need to leave that behind. Like
Mm.
this is a new lifestyle. This is something that you're going to be able to shake that guilt and shame, especially.
I don't know if you can hear me, but the Zoom completely froze up. Awesome. So, okay. So on the note of kind of the emotional side of things, when we're talking about renewing the mind, I have clients who have tremendous amounts of stress. And I'm there. I see it. It's not imagined. It's several kids and two working parents and all kinds of chaos in the house going all the time. And like people want to make progress. They want to, do good. They want to reach their goals. in stressful situations and emotional situations, it's so difficult to tell them like, oh, just do what you did, do some box breathing. Like they don't
Yeah.
want to do box breathing right then. They want some chips and the donut. You know what I mean? So how
Mhm.
do you it's such a hard question to get practically, and I know you're such a pro at this. How do you help people with that kind of like mental, emotional type self sabotage almost?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So it is really important that they show up, right, for support too, and don't try to battle through this alone. And so that's why a community group coaching program is super helpful. Being honest and not hiding, like how many years I hid with my eating, uh, coping with my secret eating, all of those things. So I personally, I like to write scripture out on note cards, like, and I will carry that around with me throughout the house, especially if I'm having a very stressful day. Right now, I'm under a ton of stress, so I will spend extra time in reading supportive things. I'm listening to books like Atomic Habits and The Power of Habits, things like that. And I've listened to these books before, but I just love to listen to them again and again and again. It is the hope is that it keeps getting easier every day that you do this. Every day that you show up, and before you know it, you realize like something has shifted. Like, and this really truly is a lifestyle that you can live with, you can thrive in, and you can no longer feel like I'm just surviving and I'm just barely breathing and my head is underwater. I call it the quieting down of that food noise too. As you abstain from sugar and step away from eating sugar in moderation, which really sets you up for the slips and the relapses. But as you quiet that food noise, quiet those cravings, remove the cues, remove any cues, unhealthy cues that make you want to go and eat junk food or whatever. And also, if the cues are things that will never go away, like TV commercials. You're always going to see stuff like that. You're watching the Super Bowl, you're going to see pizza commercials. Have new habits in place. If you got the cue, you've got the craving, what's your response going to be? Let's work on changing up the response. So it really is just a day by day being showing up and being willing to put in the work. And I know it sounds awful when you're living in chaos, but I'm living proof that you can navigate this and you can come out each and every day on the other side, and then you can be grateful at the end of the day. That's another thing. That's another really important thing is I make my coaching clients record what they are grateful for every single day. And if it's the fact that they didn't eat the Snickers bar that everybody else was eating, just small things like that.
Yeah, it
Gratefulness.
feels so hard when you're just getting started, and it really does require you to make some difficult and uncomfortable decisions where in
Mhm.
the short term it's so easy to just get that dopamine hit and you're going
Yes.
to feel great, and then you're going to hate yourself for the rest of the day because you set yourself back on your goals and what you were seeking. And
Right.
so it's so hard, and it's yeah, it's so difficult to help people understand that it
Hmm.
feels so difficult now, but it's not always going to feel this way. This is going to get better. Things are
Yeah.
going to improve. Like you said, you'll choose to do this where you can't even imagine that you would do that. Like eventually, it will change, and getting a small
Yeah.
win is more likely to get you bigger wins in the future.
Oh, yeah. Small wins are so important. Like small wins are going to build upon each other. And another thing I always remind people too, this is in my talks when I speak, is asking the question, can you be comfortable with being uncomfortable? If there's something has to change. And so it is going to be uncomfortable. I go to conferences all the time, writers and speaker conferences, and there is always dessert sitting on the table. And I'm always sitting in front of a big piece of chocolate cake. And I promise it gets easier that doesn't have a pull on your life. I promise that. If you don't believe me, I don't know, try it and come back to me in like a year and let me know what you think.
I love that. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. As you mentioned all through this conversation, I wanted to make sure we gave you space. You do write about your faith, and that is the other section in your book,
Mhm.
Redeeming Your Spirit. Tell us how you help your clients with that as well.
Yeah, I have a really important part of my method is the heart transformation. Like nothing in my life changed until my heart changed about my health, about my situation, my faith journey. Like everything came down to the heart. And as we know, like the heart, even if you are not a believer like I am, but everybody feels this deep inside that the heart is the wellspring of life. It's like everything flows from there. So, what I learned in one of my favorite verses in scripture that I stumbled on in this journey, early in my journey, is King David writes in Psalm 4:7, "You filled my heart with greater joy than when their grain and new wine abound." And as I examined that verse, I was like, okay, he's saying that there is things that are going to fill your heart with greater joy than this harvest season of food and wine, right? So, and we always love to celebrate with food. And of course, as a recovering food and sugar addict, I celebrated with food way too much. But now here's something that is filling my heart with greater joy and freedom. So I did a deeper dive on that. I'm like, what exactly is he meaning here? And I came up with a HEART acronym, which I love to share. I write so much more about this in my book, but the HEART acronym is H is for handle your emotions, E is for examine your thoughts, A is ask for motivation, and R is run with courage, and T is take action. Because, and when you put all of that together, that's where true transformation takes place. You can't just, I look back on my journey of trying to lose weight and just like counting the points or counting the calories didn't get me very far. You know, it got me to a certain point, but nothing was changing. Nothing was settling in my heart about the choices I was making. And so now I get to look at my emotions and my thoughts. And I know that motivation is super powerful to keep me moving forward. And this takes courage for sure. This is a courageous journey that people step out into. And then again, nothing changes if you don't take action.
I love that. That's a lovely acronym. Yeah,
Yeah.
it sounds like he's promoting getting grains out of the diet. It's not that good for you anyway. He's promoting the rich and
Right.
low
Yeah.
carbohydrate diet for sure.
Yeah.
You don't
Yes.
need the grains of the wine. It's way better without.
Right. Exactly.
Is this also achievable for people who are not either religious or not also Christian?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I really believe that. I think deep down everybody has a feeling or knows that we are created more than just a physical body. Like I like to think that everybody feels like they have a soul, right? And I didn't, nothing changed for me. Again, that heart didn't change until I examined like I'm more than just a physical body. Like I have emotions, I have feelings, and we all have that. And a lot, unfortunately, you know, sugar addicts, food addicts, me myself, I also testify when I speak in churches to women's events that I'm a recovering glutton too. You know, there was no shut off switch because of this sugar addiction. But putting that all together, it's like there's so much more than just how it impacted my physical body. It was impacting me emotionally, it was impacting me spiritually. It weighed so heavy on my soul. Like I feel like I was using food to fill all the nooks and crannies that were in my soul, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally does. I'm glad that you approach that. I like when that's kind of integrated in all of this. I think we all need a greater sense of connection, whatever that is for people. So, a reason to believe, a reason to wake up in the morning. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I really love that. The book, like I said, is wonderful. That's one resource that you offer. You offer many others. Tell us about some of the other resources you offer people, including the coaching that you've already mentioned.
Yeah, so my book is titled Sugar Freed, and my coaching program is also titled the Sugar Freed Me Weight Loss Solution Program. It's a 6 month program where I link arms with women, Christian women, hand in hand. We do this journey together. And again, I absolutely like the highlight of my week is our group coaching sessions. And also, I teach them a lot of lessons, of course. But it really is a faith-based journey where they are seen. I see them like I know where they've been. I know where they want to be. And I have such a passion now for helping them. The big umbrella part of my ministry and everything I do when I write and speak, I don't necessarily get invited in to speak as the keto queen or the weight loss woman, you know. My big overarching umbrella over everything I do is joy. Like there has been a new joy that has settled in my heart and when you have joy, you can't keep it to yourself. You can't keep joy quiet. You have to share it.
That's very lovely. I love that. It's cool that you're working with people in so many different ways. And we've talked earlier about the power of that group connection and having a safe space where women can feel, powerful and vulnerable and feel that
Yes.
support is absolutely wonderful. This has been a
Yes.
fantastic conversation, Christine. I've really enjoyed this. I love hearing the stories as well. Maybe you could leave us with one last final story, maybe one that didn't make it in the book, but something that's like a little bit more recent or something.
Oh, okay. So again, I love climbing mountains, and you can see pictures of me all over my website climbing mountains. I feel like it's just such a huge metaphor for picking up this mountain in my life and just kind of tossing it into the sea. But now I get to climb them, and that just fills my heart with so much joy. I actually did go back also to that mountain in Rocky Mountain National Park where I couldn't climb to Nymph Lake. I went back and I climbed that also with my daughter and my cousin. So, just showing up every day and showing up for my health. I always like to say that when we show up, God shows off. Like, everything I do is to just give hope and show women and show men too. I love to help men as well too, and just be really engaged in the X community there. But yeah, it's hope. It just all comes down to hope. Like, I couldn't do this for 30 years, and now here I am. I get to leave corporate America, and I get to inspire hope.
Amazing. What a powerful and wonderful gift that you have to be able to inspire that hope. And once again, Boundless Body Radio is sponsored by the Colorado Travel Commission, Tourism Commission, whatever. They can, yeah, they can send me the check. We'll send you the people there. Just stay away from Utah. It's fine. Christine, like I said, this has been an awesome conversation. You have such an inspiring story. And yeah, it takes a lot of courage to put in a book, to tell it, to share it. You went through a lot of very vulnerable spots as well. And so I really appreciate that. And that you're changing so many lives is really wonderful. So, Christine, where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Oh, they can find me at my website, christinetrimpe.com. You can find me all over social media by my name. And if you'd like to grab a chapter excerpt of my book, on my top right-hand corner of my website, you can see where you can grab a free chapter. It'll give you a little taste of SugarFreed. And then you can, while you're waiting for your book to come from Amazon, you can read the sample chapter.
That's cool. That's great. You offer that. I love that. Oh, that's wonderful. We'll link to all of that in the show notes. And like I said, thank you so
Yes.
very much for all of your amazing work and for getting that work out there. Like we said, it's transforming a lot of lives. So, Christine, thank you so very much for everything that you do, and thank you for taking time to be on our show today. We really appreciate you.
Thank you, Casey. It was a pleasure to be here with you.
It was an honor to host you. It was a great chat. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.